Hello, welcome to Recentered VR Podcast. My name is Gary from the YouTube channel Immerse Robot, and joining me as always is Rog, also known as Flute Rogie. How are you, mate? What have you been up to in the world of VR lately?
Same old, really. Trying quite a few things recently, probably more than I've done it in a while. But we can get into that in a bit. How are you doing?
All right, yeah, same old, really. Again, I've not really played for the past few weeks, really, when we've had the show. I've not played a huge amount of VR or anything like that. But then this past week, I've got back into a few things. And again, we can probably just go straight into it, I suppose. We can go straight into what we've been playing because news this week is taking a slight back seat, only because we've got a few impressions of the Quest Pro that are now sort of sinking in. We've had a bit more information on that, and we'll get onto that in a little while, but there's not too much else that we want to get into in this episode other than that, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But let's focus on games, because I don't think we've had a show where we've really focused on sort of new titles or anything like that that's come out, and you've played a few, so why don't you get straight into it?
Okay, yeah, it's been a bit of a split between sort of some older stuff and some of the new stuff what's been out lately. I suppose the first one and the main one recently has been Runner.
Yeah.
Sort of anime-inspired, sort of Akira style, ride your motorbike along a freeway and shoot things. And I've had a bit of a love-hate relationship with this one. On the love side, I absolutely think it's a great game. It's full on arcade. You know, it doesn't pretend to be anything else. It's an arcade shooter, and it's great for that. Visuals are pretty good. It's definitely got a look about it. The problem I've had with it is the controls to start with. Oh man, it really annoyed me to the point that when I first picked it up, I played it for about half an hour, and then just gave up. Okay. With the thought of, okay, I'll just put it aside and I'll go back to it, which I did. But the problem I had originally is if you've got a game in VR and you pick up a gun, generally speaking, you sort of use the grip button, grip button for gripping stuff. No. This for some reason, and I did get into it a bit with one of the developers on the Coffee and VR chat. I hope I didn't upset them too much. My first comment was, I'm going to really keep on whinging about this. And no, you press if you've got two guns on each side of your bike, and so for the left gun, you press the X button to pop it into your hand, or if you want the right hand gun, you press the A button. It's like, why am I not pressing grip? Even if I don't have to reach out and physically pick it up, why can't I just tap the grip button to make it jump into my hand? It's absolutely strange. And according to them, it's their testers, and apparently they have had professional VR testers testing this and giving them feedback.
Right.
It wasn't a good solution. So, either they've got very different opinions on what a good solution is for holding a gun in VR, or they need to get better testers. It's just crazy.
That is a weird one, and you'd think as well they'd maybe have some options for that kind of stuff, because that is such a complete departure of what most people will be used to in VR as well. You would expect, you grip things with a grip button. So if you're going to take a different route, then you would expect at least some kind of options there somewhere.
Yeah, it's just really, really bizarre. Anyway, I did get into this with one of the developers in chat, and basically they said they went with the current solution that they've got at the moment. They said we actually had to tear it down to rebuild the new control scheme, and the new scheme honestly works best for an arcade experience. We understand it may not be for everyone, but a superior non-standard setup would be preferred to an ineffective standard setup. I'm not sure how their superior setup, what involves pressing the phase buttons instead of the grip buttons, which caused me to just stop playing it and put it aside because it was really doing my head in, because I couldn't overcome the muscle memory of pressing the grip button.
Yeah.
And that's what the problem was.
Well, just on that point, because you're not the first person I've heard mention this issue, and I'm just struggling to think of which podcast or which YouTube video I heard someone talk about this. They were saying this, and immediately they said the controls were odd for them, but they did get used to it eventually.
Yeah. Well, when I went back to it, honestly, after Coffee and VR last weekend, I actually went back to it and it's one of those weird things where it's almost like sometimes if you're trying to like learn to play a piece of music, you can't get it no matter how much you practice it. You put it aside, you go back to it a day or two later, and your fingers just suddenly seem to work and know where they're supposed to be going. And it was like that all of a sudden, my thumbs knew what they were doing, and I could, use the weapons properly. And all of a sudden as well, the first level suddenly became shockingly easy compared to what it felt like when I first played it. Because one of the things people say about Runner is it's a very challenging game, and it is. I think I'm up to the second boss, and the second boss seems to one-shot me, and I'm not sure what's going off there.
Okay.
But when I first played it, that first level seemed really tough. When I went back to it, it didn't. And what it was is the first time I was playing it, it wasn't tough because of the actual game was tough. It was tough because I was fighting the controls, and I just couldn't get my head around it. But once that had sort of clicked with me, it was fine.
Just quickly, because I don't know a lot about this game, but I did watch the trailer, and it's got this kind of 80s VHS kind of vibe to it, hasn't it? But of course, I like the trailer for that kind of stuff. I wonder if that's what drew you in as well to play it in the first place. But
yeah, pretty much. And the thing as well is, I know I'm sort of whining and moaning about it, but in all honesty, if it was a bad game, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. I'd have just thrown it aside, and I wouldn't be even bothering to talk about it. I just wouldn't, I just wouldn't be bothered.
Yeah.
But I liked what I could see was there. It's just the controls was a slight problem, And the developer said, like, with the grip button, said they use, the grip button's used for grabbing grenades and activating laser sights, so it's certainly implemented in some fashion. And the good news is that the vast majority of folks really haven't had an issue with it. Yeah. Now, I suggested that an option might be nice there, to be able to flip that round.
Yeah.
The reply was, it's not easy to add a control system since it's integrated into the game. So, it's not easy to change around because that control system is integrated into the game. Except when you load the game up, you're sat in the menu, and on the right-hand side of you, while you're sat in the menu, the two guns are actually sort of holstered in a rack on the right-hand side, and you can pick them up and shoot stuff in the menu. How do you pick them up in the menu? You use the grip buttons.
Right, okay.
So it's like, excuse me, what is going on? But, but they've said nothing's off the table, though. We want to make sure the basic and intended functionality is perfect first. So maybe an option, will come in later on. And it's not a massive change, really. It's just let me swap round the A button and the grip button functionality. Even if you don't want me to hold down the grip button all the time, maybe even if it's just a toggle like it is with the A button or the X button at the minute, fine. But just let me tap the grip button. To use the gun, and
With the game itself, what is there like any variation in gameplay? Because when I watched the trailer, it's basically you're on a bike, you're going through the streets at high speed, shooting things, and then you get to an end boss. So is it sort of that all the way through the game? Do you know, or
pretty much. I think is it 8 levels? I can't remember how many levels there is. I think it's 8, maybe. And you're storming along the street on your bike. You can steer left, right, speed up or slow down, and you get a variety of enemies coming in. Some flying, some on the ground. Somewhat of got to shoot armor off them to get to the weak points to destroy them. Right. And from what I've played through the first 2 levels anyway, it seems pretty much the same. You get to the end. The 2 different end bosses are totally different. But it's just a good arcade shooter, and I know I've whined about it a lot. But if you want a good solid arcade game on Quest at the minute, go and take a look at it, because there's a lot of fun. And I might be a bit of an outlier when it came to the controls,
Yeah, well, as I say, you're not the first person I've seen mention it, so I know at least some people do feel the same way. But yeah, I've not tried this one, but it was one that I know was getting quite a bit of interest, and when I looked at the trailer, I thought, that looks pretty good actually. Yeah,
it's a good fun solid game. It's £11, so it's nothing exorbitant. So yeah, give it a try, definitely.
Yeah.
What have you been playing since I've rambled on about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've got just a couple of games on my list, but I'll just start with one, and then we could go back to some more stuff that you've done. But the first one, well, I tell you what, I'm going to talk about Windlands because it's one of my favourite VR games anyway. Okay. So this is a very old game. Anybody that knows it came out, I don't even know when it came out, either 2015 or 2016, I think, because it might have actually released before the launch of the Rift and the Vive. I'm not 100% sure on that. I think it was available to play on the DK2, so I'm pretty sure.
I've got memories of playing it with a joypad, looking and hitting a joypad button to aim, maybe. And so
that's right. Actually, I think you're right on that. Thinking about it, so it might have been a DK2 game without any motion controllers, but it's an older game. But I played it a lot when I first got my Vive. I played it, probably one of my most played VR titles during that first part, the first few months when I had the Vive, and it's just. People who don't know, it's like a platform game. You have to get to certain areas, but it's swinging. You use these hooks and things like that. I'm sure everybody pretty much is aware of Windlands at this point because they've also had a sequel, Windlands 2, which is also a great game. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because I know that last year, or it might even be the year before actually, they released it on Quest as an App Lab title. So previously it's only been available on PC and also PSVR, but just having that standalone capability to play it natively on Quest, I thought I'm going to pick this up. So it's for £10.99 on App Lab, and it runs great, it looks great, it's exactly the same as I remember it, but just a really solid game. Did you play any Windlands like on the with motion controls, like on your original Rift or anything?
I don't think I did, and I've just done a quick Google, and according to Road to VR, it originally started off as a Rift DK1 tech demo, so in 2014.
Wow!
So it's probably way back then, only DK1 and DK2 when I played it, and I never picked it up when it came out for one reason. The swinging thing, I didn't have an issue with, But when if you got stuck on the ground, when you started moving. It had a curve. It had an acceleration curve. It didn't just start running at a constant speed.
Yes, yeah.
And that acceleration curve was, even back then, was one of the very few things that would make me feel ill within a minute. And I just couldn't stomach being on the ground, so I never bothered with it.
No. I'm wondering, okay, so here's the thing. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think I've ever got motion sick in VR. There's been a couple of times, and I can't even remember specific examples, where I've maybe felt a little bit odd here and there, but I've never, to my knowledge, got motion sick. This is weird now. So my son, I picked it up partially because I wanted to play it anyway. I wanted to see what it was like on the Quest, but also my son wanted to play it. So he's actually played through it. We bought it like only a few days ago. He's played through it on easy, is now working his way through it on normal. I've played through the first world, and I'm starting to feel like I'm getting a little bit motion sick in places on this. This is really surprising to me because this is really my first experience, as far as I know, of feeling this, and I don't know why, because I played loads of this on PC. I don't know if it's the frame rate or something like that that's getting me this time, but it could be that the way you move along the floor, because you've got this, it's very slidey kind of movement. You've got weight, and if you stop moving, you'll carry on. And you've got the strafe mechanic, which also sort of has got weight behind it and things like this, which might be contributing to it. So, I don't know, maybe I've had something happen to me where now I get motion sick in VR games. I don't know, but it's not nice. But I've managed to get through the first little world, and then I'll move on. I'll keep progressing through it anyway. It's not bad enough for me to stop playing or anything. I played it for about an hour in one go, and it's not, I didn't get progressively worse as it went on. It was just like this odd feeling. But do you get motion sick in many other things, Rog?
No, not really. Very, very rarely. I'm trying to think if there's anything since sort of like, CV1 onwards where anything has actually affected me. I'm sure there was something once, and I can't remember what it was. But no, that aside, no. But Windlands always stood out as one which would immediately.
Yeah.
make me feel ill.
One thing as well, before I pass it back to you, with Windlands, because it is, for anybody that doesn't know, this is a great game. It just is a great game anyway. It feels great to play. It's really satisfying. It's got great music. The graphics are simplistic, but they're really, they suit it well. Yeah. But the one thing that I will say, because I've always thought that I preferred Windlands too, and I probably still do overall, but one of the things with the original Windlands that I'm realising is that the vertigo, the sense of height you get in this game is way more than it is in the sequel. I don't know if they kept things more on a flat plane in the sequel, because in this original game you get to really like ridiculous heights above the world, and then you can progress onto the next stage and you just have to sort of take a leap of faith almost and try to navigate your way through to get to the next swinging point. But yeah, really, really enjoyable game to this day. I absolutely adore it. I think it's one of the best VR titles in terms of just how it feels. Gameplay is pretty basic, really, and the progression is pretty basic, but it's just how it feels is good.
Yeah, I mean, it was basically the first Spider-Man simulator, wasn't it? I can't think of anything else really before that.
But that's the thing, the swinging mechanic's so good in that if there was a Spider-Man game, you'd want it to feel as good as this, because those little demos of Spider-Man and stuff that we had, you had like a little swinging mechanic in that, but it didn't feel good, to me at least. This feels a lot better. You feel the weight of the swing, and you can judge it, and you can actually do some good like little combos. If you get the right path through, you can do some really good little combos with it as well. But yeah, I do still recommend it. It's an older game, but it's out on Quest, so I just wanted to draw a bit of attention to it. But what's your next game?
I'll get this one out of the way pretty quickly. It's Townscaper, and it's not my kind of thing at all. I was bored to death within 10 to 15 minutes. Basically, this isn't a game, it's a toy, and people call it like one of those things that you can play for relaxation and creativity and that sort of thing. I thought I'd give it a go anyway. I'm probably the entirely wrong person to even review or comment on it. I know Tyler from Coffee and VR absolutely loves this. Right. He can't get enough of it. He's been playing it in VR and he's been playing it flat on his phone as well.
I didn't realise it was a mobile game as well.
It seems to be all over the place. It's £8, and you've seen everything within in a few minutes. But it's not a game. It's a toy. And again, if you want something where you can if you're one of those people who can sort of zone out or turn off a bit using something in VR, something relaxing, then fine. It may well be for you, but it's definitely not for me.
Is it just basically arranging buildings in different ways? And
basically, you've got a blank canvas to start with, and you click, and and buildings appear, and you can sort of click all over the place, and buildings will appear. And if you click between them, you can interconnect them with walkways, etc., and pathways, and build really tall buildings. You can zoom in. You can't zoom into life size, but you can zoom in pretty far. Right. But it's just I'm the wrong person to comment on it, really.
Yeah, it's not a game, is it? It's just a relaxation thing. Yeah.
But obviously, there's value there. It's well reviewed. It's well reviewed. Say Tyler seems to love it, so I think it's just got to be the right person for that sort of thing. And if it sounds like it might appeal to you, give it a go. It's £8. It's
Yeah. Another game that is pretty new, that is getting a lot of interest at the minute, is Arcaxer, which I know you picked up as well. This is one I came very close. I mentioned before the show, I came very close to picking this one up myself last week, but I didn't in the end. But why don't you get into that?
Again, this is another one what's fairly well reviewed. In the community, and in all honesty, and being rude, I thought it was fairly mediocre. It basically seems like a small dev team wanted to make a game that sort of echoed Sword Art Online. If you've ever seen the anime of that, where basically you've got like a virtual world. There's some small shops and stuff in that world, but then there's a big tower. Yeah. And it's basically the seems to be the point is you go into the tower and work your way up floor by floor, etc. It's just it feels it feels very indie. Let's put it that way. The draw distance on Quest, it is available on PC as well on Steam. But on Quest, you can see like the detail in the landscape, the grass detail and such kicks in like, a meter or two away from the camera. And it's not, the graphics aren't amazing. They're fine, they're serviceable.
Yeah,
nothing beyond that.
When I've looked at the trailer and just looked at some gameplay of it as well, it looks... yeah, I mean, I again, don't want to be rude, but it does look very indie just from the screenshots and stuff like that. But a lot of people seem to like it. So the gameplay, is it turn-based or...
This is a weird thing. So you've got real-time control of the character from like a third-person view.
Yep.
And for combat, what you do is you run up to a creature in the dungeon, and it basically flips into a first-person view. And it is turn-based. You've got so many action points, and you can either cast spells, which you do by sort of like throwing your hand forward, and you can cast a fireball, for example.
Right.
Or if you like use your grip button, your grip button for gripping. What it does, it puts you, it then sort of moves you in front of the creature, and you can slash away at them. And so it's sort of turn-based like that. Once you've had your go, enemy creatures have their go, and if they fire projectiles at you, you physically have to sort of dodge out of the way. Yeah, the combat's okay, but the actual, when you're running around, once you get into the dungeon, oh man, the graphics are just so dull. You've got sort of like boring corridors just suspended in a black void,
right?
And it looks boring visually. You can actually turn on the pass-through mode for the background, so if you want to play something where you're aware of your situation, what's going off around you, you can turn pass-through on and do that, but. I don't really want to look at black and white grainy pass through.
No, I wouldn't choose that either. There's a few games that allow you to do that, and some I can sort of understand as well. Like, I think Cubism allows you to do that.
Yeah,
yeah,
Cubism, yeah.
Which I think actually works pretty well with that one, to be honest. I like that. But yeah, I wouldn't do it for everything. Yeah, it's disappointing because a lot of people seem to really like Arcaxer that I saw.
There wasn't one thing really what made me go, oh, that might hook me. There's a story there, but it's pretty basic and it just gets straight into it. The graphics are sort of serviceable, then you get into the dungeons and they just look dull. Yeah. I don't know if the music's any good. I really can't remember it. But I don't know, maybe it's a generational thing as well. But there was, during the tutorial, an NPC appears and guides you about to different places to tells you how to do stuff. And during one of the combat tutorials, the NPC stood there. I know she stood there, just doing this looped dance animation. What looks sort of like somebody in an MMO has typed in an emote to dance.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, it just. I know it sounds daft, but it really annoyed me. Maybe I'm getting too old for some stuff, but yeah, it's like I say though, it's been getting really well reviewed. So maybe I'm just missing something about it. Maybe it isn't just a thing for me. But if you want a dungeon crawler in VR, have a look. It's 19 quid. It's 18.99, and from what I can tell, because I looked on the app and in the headset, it's not cross-buy, even though it's on the Rift store and the Quest store. It wanted me to buy it again if I wanted to look at the PC version, so it doesn't appear to be cross-buy.
Okay.
It's £19.49 on Steam if you want to have a look at it on there. But yeah, if you're looking for a dungeon crawler, maybe give it a look. Maybe I'm just missing something about it.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about a game which, again, it's not a brand new game or anything, but it's one that I picked up on launch, Ultrawings 2. So this is a few months old. I think, did it come out last year? It must have come out last year. Should have researched some of these release dates and stuff before, but I forgot. But yeah, Ultrawings 2, it's been out for a while anyway. I picked it up on launch and I really liked it. I like the original and I really like this, but for whatever reason, I don't know if there was just a lot else that I was playing around that time. I didn't really spend a lot of time in there. So I thought this is one I was just looking through my library, thinking of things that I could play and talk about on the show. And I thought Ultrawings 2, it's sort of the top of my list really of things I wanted to get back to. So I went in, I'm still very early on. I've only unlocked 2 planes first of all, but it does this thing where you feel like this game, the developers definitely fleshed it out. Compared to the first one, they've made it much more compelling in terms of drawing you through, because the part where I am at the moment, I'm going through sort of the training missions, then you get the proper missions for each plane. And at this stage, the missions are relatively short, but you're straight into the next one. And it's just got this progression system that just keeps you wanting to try the next level, because there's, it probably will only take sort of 5 or 10 minutes to get through. And then you sort of progress on to more and more complicated things. And the fact that you're unlocking these new planes, and each plane has a different way of being flown, and it takes a while to get your head around all of these things as well, that's quite interesting. It keeps changing things up. I think that's the main thing that's keeping me wanting to play this. It's like you never settle on one way to play the game. You get used to a plane, you think you've got your head around it, but then you're straight on. You've unlocked a new plane with a whole new set of things to unlock with that as well, and different missions as well. So there's definitely, I feel like there's more variety in this one than there was in the first one, and I like the first one, but I just didn't stick with it. But I think this one now I am going to. The graphics are pretty much the same as what you expect from the original, really. They're very basic, but they look good when you're flying above these little islands. Very similar to Windlands, really. They're basic, but they look good for the type of game that it is. And it's got a little bit of combat, so it's switching things up as well. You've got a handgun. And I think, like in the original, you had a handgun to shoot balloons and things, but in this one, you're up against more sort of AI-driven drones, land targets, and things like that. So there's definitely a lot of variety with it, and I like seated games on the Quest as well. Basically, whenever I'm in VR and I'm standing in VR, I like to be standing in real life. But if I'm seated in VR, then of course I like to be seated in real life as well. So I like to have sort of a stable of these types of games, and Ultrawings 2 is one I can just sit on the sofa, put on, and play through a few levels. So it fits quite well with that to me. But yeah, really enjoyable game. So this is another one. I've picked two that I knew I was going to enjoy anyway, but I did want to talk about these and draw a bit of attention to it. I've mentioned Windlands 2 on my channel before, because that was one that I just really love that game, and Ultrawings 2 is just one I always wanted to get back to, and it didn't disappoint. It got really great reviews when it was launched, and I definitely enjoy it.
Yeah, I played the first one, but I've never played the second. So it sounds pretty good. The first one, I think, was a bit limited in that I don't think there was enough variety really. So I think, like you, I sort of played it for a bit and then really didn't go back to it.
Yeah, well, that's definitely one thing that the dev is focused on with this. I mean, I think in terms of content, this has got way more than even I expected. I sort of listened and watched reviews on it, so I knew that they'd gone sort of to the next level in terms of content, but the way it just gives you all of these things to unlock, so you can unlock all of these islands as well. So you start unlocking planes, then you unlock the islands, and then for each plane you've got different things to do on all of the islands all over again. So in terms of content, it's there, and as long as the missions don't get too samey, or you're doing the same kinds of missions again and again with very little difference between them, I guess that's where I'll probably fall off eventually. But at this stage, there's still too much to unlock and do, really. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it right now.
Nice.
So there is one other game that you've played that I have also played that we could talk about. But first of all, I don't know if you want to get into Crisis Brigade 2. I nearly said, because was this originally called Crisis Brigade? Was that
Crisis Brigade?
Yeah.
Crisis Brigade. Yes. One of those games what insisted on shoehorning VR into the title in a stupid way, but fortunately they've renamed it.
Yes, that's it. So tell us about that.
So yes, Crisis Brigade 2 Reloaded apparently is the same game as Crisis VRgade, whatever you call it, on App Lab. But it's now on SideQuest App Lab. I can't remember which one it was on, but it's now on the proper Oculus store, and they've just basically renamed it, and it's got a better name now. Basically fulfills all your sort of time crisis needs, really.
Yeah.
Played it in co-op the other week, and just found it a lot of fun. There's not much more I can say. It's a sort of a wave-based shooter. You take down a wave of bad guys. Once you've done that, it shows you actually sort of teleporting along a line along a path.
Okay.
To the next point, where in sort of like maybe Time Crisis, you'd see your viewpoint move along to the next place you were going to be at before you start shooting again.
Yeah.
This it doesn't. So it's sort of safe. It's sort of safe for people who are a bit iffy with with smooth movement.
Well, it seems like I am now. hope not, but
you're just getting too old, mate.
Yeah, maybe it's that. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a nice little co-op shooter, and infinitely more easier with another person. If you play by yourself, you do get like an AI guy that sort of pops up and then sort of pretty much dies within about 5 seconds, and sometimes they'll come back. But they're absolutely useless. It's quite a bit of a challenge, I found, really. I know Wolveraza on Discord, he was saying he enjoyed this one. I'm not surprised because he likes a game that's got a good challenge, and it was difficult on single player. As soon as I played it co-op, though, wow. Just infinitely easier, definitely. Although we did turn the difficulty up, and the challenge kicked back in again.
Right.
But yeah, good game. £11, bargain.
Do you know how many levels? Did you mention how many levels there are in this, or is it?
Not sure. Is it when we first started playing it? My mate Paul, he's saying like, is there only 3 levels? And I'm looking at it, and there's like you've got like 3 sort of monitors or icons for selecting levels.
Okay.
And underneath that it says, I think it said time attack. And I thought, oh, time attack's another button you click on and you just do a time attack of some sort. But no, you click on the time attack and then does it change to challenge mode? I can't remember which way around it is. And a new set of icons appears. I thought, oh, and there's like a zombie. There's a zombie mode. There's a zombie level and some other levels. So I don't know if there's 6 individual ones or if there's any more. I've absolutely no idea. But I'll say for $10.99, it's I thought we were a bit of a bargain. Yeah, quite a bit of fun.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people sort of mention this when it was in its first iteration on side quest or whatever, but it never really drew me in. I thought, like these, I like arcade games as much as the next person, but I never really felt like, because we had so many wave shooters basically at the start of VR, so I always sort of hesitant to get back into that kind of thing. But I suppose now you've got these ones which are emulating good arcade games and giving you that shooting experience you want. And I will say, you sent me the footage that you recorded, and I've been watching a bit of that earlier today, and it does look like a lot of fun, I've got to say, with this one. Yeah,
you can even grip to hold your gun. Bargain.
Yeah, there we go. Can't stop having your little digs, can you?
I'm never going to let that go till they patch it. Absolutely not.
We'll mention this every week then. Runner, you got to patch it. Okay. That's another one. I'm considering picking up Crisis Brigade 2, to be honest. That's another one. But I did want to talk about 2076 Midway Multiverse. This is an Ivanovic Games which they've done a series of sort of retro stylized arcade games where they sort of do VR versions of sort of Operation Wolf, 1943 and those kinds of games really, but they have this flair of doing them in 3D, and you start off where you see them sort of as side scroll, well in this case it's a side scrolling shooter like R-Type or something like that, but then you have these more VR-y kind of sections. We can get into that, but yeah, why don't you tell us about 2076?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I say, it's got throwbacks to R-Type, to Gradius or Nemesis, all those sort of games, and yeah, it's the sci-fi sequel to 1976, which was based on the old 1942 and 1943 arcade games.
Yeah,
and yeah, it's it's one of my favourite games at the moment. I only played it. I've only been in it for about maybe 4 hours, but I don't know. There's something about it. Maybe it's the retro sort of side. You're flying along through it. And at one point, there's suddenly volcanoes spewing like rocks and lava out, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, that's Gradius. It's got all those throwbacks. There's 2 different modes to play on it. There's a campaign mode and an arcade mode, and the arcade mode, quote unquote, fixes the issue that some people had with 1976, which was the immersion zones. Now, what it was when you were playing 1976, which was a horizontal scroller. Every so often, an icon would appear and you could fly over it, and it would put you in an immersion zone. It would put you in the cockpit of a bomber or whatever. And you're suddenly in a first-person sort of shooting section. And the controls, in all honesty, felt a bit they didn't feel very analog. It wasn't that good. It was the weakest point of the game for me.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Although they were optional, you didn't have to, fly over the icon to trigger that mode. If you're going for the high scores, you've got to.
Yeah,
You couldn't just ignore it. Now in 2076, there's two modes. There's the story campaign mode, which again has those modes in it, or there's the arcade mode, which ditches those altogether. There's still some third-person sort of behind view sections in it, especially when you get to the boss fights. But they're fine. But actually, the cockpit views on 2076, they've definitely improved over 1976. It feels more analog. There's more control. It just feels overall better, to the point that when I go into those modes, I don't think, oh no, I've got to do this, which was always the feeling with 1976.
Yes, yeah.
With this one, it's fine. And it basically, having the campaign in the arcade, it's the same levels, but the slight differences. In the campaign story mode, you actually have to reach out with your hand, pull levers in places. You've got an orb you can use to block firepower on some guns that your ship can't actually shoot at. Stuff like that. Whereas the arcade mode, it ditches the hand controls altogether, and you can actually just play it with like an Xbox joypad or whatever. So there's two ways to play it, and it's just really good. It's their best one so far. You can see in their progression from I can't remember the name, but the Operation Wolf style one they did.
Operation Warcade. That one.
Warcade. I think that was one of the first ones, and that is rough.
Yeah.
It works, but it's definitely rough. There's 1976, which is good, but it still had its flaws. Even though I played through that on PC and PSVR, It's definitely a rough game, but I really enjoyed it. But then again, retro arcade shoot 'em up, give it to me, definitely.
Yeah.
So,
well, on 1976, just on that point, I was that was one. I didn't feel like the top-down sections were rough on that at all. I thought they were really well done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you're saying. It's like the more immersion zone sections where it felt. That's another one where it went from feeling really quite, polished and stuff to feeling a little bit indie on those sections. And Operation Warcade was like a bit of a novelty when that one came out, because, like you say, it was the first one, and I really enjoyed it for a limited period of time. But going back to it now, you can see the differences in how they've progressed. And just quickly as well, there are demos to these on Steam. If you wanted to try these, you can, which is how I played 2076. I played the demo, which is available on Steam. And I'll echo pretty much what Roger said on this. I think it's absolutely fantastic. There is something about these types of games that, to me, they just look incredible. Like 1976 just looked incredible, those top-down sections. And it might be the retro thing, the nostalgia thing that is making me feel like that. But this one as well, for a horizontal sort of R-type kind of shooter, some of the effects and just the way... It's just a novelty. It's that novelty value, to be honest, a part of it, at least. But really, really good. I've only played the demo, but... of course, I'm thinking of picking up different ones, because we've not even mentioned all the others. They've got one that's supposed to be like a version of Pang, I think. They've got
Pangman, yeah.
So you can get these. I've not even tried that demo yet.
Right, Pangman, what I would say is that one doesn't work for me. Although, because I think, was that their third... I don't know which one. Probably did it come after 1976? Can't recall. But it's got a level of polish. It looks good.
Yeah,
Pangman actually does look good, but really, I think it would have been a better game if they'd have just made it a full-on normal version of Pang from the side.
Yes,
with depth. With this one, it's first person. You've got a gun. You can shoot your line out, the line out, what the balls can collide into, but you can sort of shoot it in any direction, and it just didn't work for me. I just ended up using the gun. And it was I think that one was a bit of a failure on the gameplay side, but it definitely looked the part. You can see how they've progressed as they've been working on these. And on 2076 as well, the one of the other things what's nice about it over 1976 is it starts off on that basically a 3D cinema screen, but then 30 seconds or a minute into the level, cinema screen suddenly sort of like gets disintegrated away, and it brings you fully into that that scrolling world. So it's then all around you, and you can actually turn and look down into the level that's coming up, so you can really line up your shots for stuff in the distance. It just works really well.
It does, yeah. I really enjoyed those types of games, and I'm pretty sure because they seem to be quite prolific as well in how they're getting these out there. But I'm looking forward to seeing what they do next there.
Just on a quick point as well, in 1976, as we're recording this, 1976 is currently in a bundle on Fanatical, the lowest tier of which you pay, I think it's like £5, and you could pick up 1976 and a couple of other games as well. Which, I mean, a £5 for 1976 is a bargain anyway, so that's worth looking into.
Yeah. Okay, have we got anything else we want to mention before we move on?
Just looking, the only other thing I've been playing was Mother Gunship Forge. I can't really comment on it at the minute. I've only been through the tutorial, so I'll leave that for another time. Okay,
yeah. Actually, that's another one I was considering. I heard another podcast talking about that. I don't know which one, but there was another couple of podcasts probably mentioning this, and they said that it was quite good. The problem is that that's a roguelite, and I don't know. Yeah. I keep trying to get into them, but they never seem to grab me, so I'm sort of hesitant, but we'll see. Okay, we can move on to the next topic. So we did want to just get back into the Quest Pro and the MetaConnect, because when we did last week's episode with Steve from VR Roundtable, that was directly after the keynote MetaConnect. So we watched the keynote, and then we watched tested video impressions of the Quest Pro, and then we went straight into record. So a lot of our impressions are a little bit raw, and also we didn't have all the information which later came out through various sources. So the first thing with the Quest Pro, we just want to go through some of the extra information we've received, and just some sort of impressions now I've had time to digest all the information as well. The first thing I wanted to mention is the fact that it seems that the depth sensor has now been removed from the Quest Pro, which is one of the biggest disappointments to me, because it was one of the things that really would differentiate it from pretty much everything we've got. But more importantly, it's one of the things that would allow for a really compelling AR experience, because with a depth sensor it can have automatic room mapping, environment mapping, occlusion meshes, and all of these things which are quite important, and they have removed it seems, and based on rumours, things that have come from David Heaney and Brad Lynch mentioned, it seems that this was removed just 5 months ago, so not long ago. It seemed to be like a last minute decision to do this. I know you saw this as well, Rog. What were your thoughts on this?
It's like, I mean, what a thing to take away. It seems absolutely crazy. And I've seen a couple of different reasons as to why this was done. The first was a production problem, and it was causing something to crack. That was one thing I saw reported.
Right.
And then the other one, which seems absolutely sort of bizarre and bonkers, is that it could actually be used, some material, it could actually be used to see through if the material was thin enough, and they were worried about it being used for sort of like nefarious purposes, which is like, seems absolutely mad.
Yeah, because if that's the case, then will we never get a device with a depth sensor on? That's the thing that's worrying me a little bit. But
yeah, but what about everything else out there? This would not be the first thing that's got a sensor on it. So is it was there a production problem, or are Meta just being really, really cautious? It's like Carmack was saying, that they seem to be being careful with things. So
yeah,
who knows?
I mean, I will say, like, some people are probably not too concerned about it not having a depth sensor. I think, for me, one of the things with this headset, one of the main things that would make me excited is the AR capabilities of it. And to get that compelling AR where you've got really good, high-quality occlusion meshes, so it knows where all your furniture is, so any AR objects or little AR characters or whatever you've got running around, they'll disappear convincingly behind door frames or pieces of furniture and things like that, which without that, I'm not saying they can't do it without that, it's just that that's the piece of technology that will make that really precise. And something like Magic Leap 1, I believe that's got a depth sensor in there, which I've used, and it will automatically scan your room. It does take a while, but it will automatically scan your room and then generate all this entire occlusion mesh around your furniture. And anything that you do with AR in there from that point on will be occluded by furniture or door frames, and it makes for like a really compelling experience, especially when you're playing like a shooter and you've got these robots that are coming in and out of your room through the door frame, disappearing behind walls and then reappearing through the door frame. There's something about that, and they have mentioned, Meta have mentioned, that they are hoping to do like automatic Guardian, automatic room mapping with the cameras, using a different algorithm in order to do this. But at the moment, you still have to manually do your Guardian in the same way as you do on your Quest 2. The other thing with the depth sensor is that it would also allow for much better hand tracking, more accurate hand tracking as well. And it could do things that probably, I mean, I don't know if I would say they're impossible with just camera-based hand tracking, but with a depth sensor, it makes all of these things a lot easier. And it's the price as well, the price of this device. I thought one of the reasons it was so expensive was because it had all of these types of sensors on there as well. So the fact they've removed it, it's just a big disappointment to me. And I know I'm probably banging on a bit too much about it, but it was just one of the things I couldn't believe when I first saw it. I didn't realise, because they didn't mention it, and Zuckerberg mentioned that it would have that as well months ago. But it's a big loss. It's definitely a big loss. There's no denying it. Yeah. So there's a few other things that we learned during this past week as well. The other thing is that, so this is an odd one actually. David Heaney said on Twitter that the Quest Pro will launch with eye-tracked foveated rendering. This is something that we didn't hear too much about during Connect, and in fact during Carmack's talk he was talking about eye-tracked foveated rendering, how the benefits for it in terms of performance aren't necessarily quite as high as we all expect it to be, and there are problems which are not necessarily solved with it. But he didn't actually say, when you rewatch that, he doesn't actually say that they are not implementing it, which was the impression I got originally. But apparently, eye-tracked foveated rendering is coming on the Quest Pro, which, I wasn't aware of that, and will have obvious benefits for performance on certain things. What do you think of that, Rog? Yeah, it's a bit weird. Carmack's always had a bit of a downer when it comes to, dynamic foveated rendering. He's always been on about it's not, it isn't as great as you might think it'll be, it's really hard to do, etc. So I'm really wanting to get hands on with a PSVR 2 and see what it's like. Yeah, because he was talking about all of these issues, all of these problems, like there's latency issues, and he actually ended that little section where he's talking about dynamic foveated rendering. He said that he was talking about one specific point, but then he said it's not something that we've implemented yet, but it's something that we can implement within the system in future. Now, I took that to mean it was the actual eye-tracked foveated rendering itself that they are not implementing. But when you listen to him, he's not actually saying that. He's saying something specific to do with the eye-tracked foveated rendering, which isn't implemented. So I don't know if it will have or not, but it seems that Upload seem to have said that they've confirmed it. I don't know about that 100%, but anyway. I just wanted to mention as well, because I wasn't aware how the pass-through worked on this. I knew that it had these two black and white cameras, and then they overlaid colour with the third RGB camera. But the way it actually works, listening to various people talk about it, it seems that they use these two black and white cameras and then they create some kind of 3D map, something else which would have been much easier with a depth sensor in there. Yep. Create some kind of basic 3D map from these two stereo cameras and then overlay the colour image in a way which sort of follows this 3D map. It's an odd way. I try to wrap my head around this, but one of the things that people mentioned who have tried this pass through, they seem to say that you will sometimes have edges. So Jeremy on Tested, or maybe it was it Jeremy on test? I'm just trying to think now. I put Jeremy on test on the notes, but I'm not 100% it was him. But he said that it had...
Probably Norm.
Yeah, well, I didn't think Jeremy had tried it. That's the thing, yeah. So, yeah, it might have been Norm, but they said that there's like a line almost on the edge of certain objects. There's a line of black and white still, and it was Eric Hartley as well, E-. He also said that there is like a halo almost around your hands when you use hand tracking, and you've got this halo of black and white almost around them as well. And also somebody else mentioned separately that there is like this distortion thing where when you move your head quickly, you can get this sort of distortion where the colour overlay isn't quite mapping perfectly to the 3D scene and stuff. So it seems like it's a little bit wobbly at the moment in terms of that, but I'm sure they'll make that better with software.
Yeah, it's probably going to improve. I mean, look, if you remember going back to like the CV1 or even the DK2, there was a lot of problem back then with stuff like chromatic aberration, where because of the way the barrel distortion works and everything, the RGB for the image would get misaligned because of the way different wavelengths of light react, going through or bend going through a lens.
Yeah.
And it took them a while to get that right, because that was on the early headsets, that was really bad. But, they improved it over time, and that was purely a software thing.
Yes.
So, hopefully they'll be able to sort something out and improve it over time.
Well, one of the things I was going to say as well, just in general to this, like everything that people will talk about with their hands-on of the Quest Pro at this stage, if you look at the Quest 2, like the Quest 2 is a much better headset today than it was when it launched. And that's all down to just software iterations and improvements in software. So I expect the Quest Pro to be no different from that. I expect all of these things to improve over time as well.
Yeah.
But you mentioned as well, because this was on the Tested podcast, that stylus thing, which you can attach to the bottom of the controllers, it's pressure sensitive as well. So I've always thought about this, how accurate these things can be if you want to do fine movements with that kind of stuff. But the fact it's got this pressure sensitivity built into it as well, I suppose that's going to help creatives that want to use this kind of stuff. Did you ever use in workrooms? I don't know if you ever went in there to try it out, but you can actually turn your Quest 2 controller upside down and use it as like a marker pen. And I tried this, and it actually works pretty well, to be honest.
Oh, right. Okay. No, I've never tried workrooms, not at all. But I imagine having something physical that feels a bit more like the end of a pen on an actual surface is going to be really good for artists and the creative people out there, at least, anyway. Yeah,
I would think so. And just on the controllers, so we learned that they've got some extra stuff on them that we didn't necessarily know about last week. They've got sort of 3 haptic motors. They've got these pinch controls as well, where you rest it on the flat curved side of the top of the controller and on the trigger to do like pinch motion controls as well, and the index finger tracking as well. That's all in there. So it seems like they're pretty high-tech controllers.
Yeah, I was surprised with the haptic thing. I'd totally missed out on that. I didn't realise there were three different points of haptic contact. So yeah, I'd be interested to try those out definitely and see how they sort of feel compared to something like the PSVR 2 controllers, which obviously they've got the resistive sort of feedback on them, but the general haptics in like a in a normal DualSense controller are pretty damn good, really. So be interesting to try out these new ones. Although then again, I'm not forking out the 300 quid for a new set of controllers just to use them with my Quest 2. No,
this is the thing. I'd love to try them, and this is just quickly. I've been to 3 different Curry stores here in the UK, just desperate trying to find one that is going to have. Just desperate to find one where they even know about the Quest Pro, to be honest. Oh. But I went round and, 3 different stores, 3 different cities, really, as well. I've travelled round just to try. Because the thing is, the demo, there is a website that you can go to and put in your location to find your nearest demo, but it just doesn't work. I can't get it to work. It won't. It says there are no demos available in your location, no matter where you put it. So that's the one thing. But yeah, so they didn't have any Quest Pros set up on display. There were no demos available. This might be a thing where they come in at the weekends. You know, that was one thing that I noticed with like Vive demos at PC Worlds, Curry's PC Worlds. They used to only really have them running at weekends.
That's actually been mentioned in the US. Somebody posted on Discord earlier that they're only running the demos on a Saturday and a Sunday.
Okay, so maybe it's that. Yeah. But yeah, they've not got them set up or anything. So you know, maybe I'll try again at the weekend sometime.
Yeah.
Just quickly on the controllers as well, because we were sort of under the impression, based on I don't know, a few different sources really, that the controllers only had sort of the same battery life as the headset, which turns out not to be true. According to Boz, he tweeted they've got up to 8 hours, but then sort of tweeted again they've got on average between 4 to 6 hours of battery life. So that's a hell of a lot better anyway than what we were expecting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Carmack came out and said he'd been using one for 4 hours straight, and he's still not getting any warnings about the battery on the controllers. So, yeah, it's a bit weird where this 1 to 2 hours thing has come from, because I know somebody actually posted that they actually went into the Meta store in the US, and the actual people in there, when they asked how long the controllers were going to last, they quoted 1 to 2 hours as well. So it seems like, okay, yeah, store employee, maybe they've not got the full details. Maybe they're just quoting the same specs for the controllers as for the headset, you know, or just making an assumption of something. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be as bad as we first thought anyway.
No. The one thing I wanted to just finish off with as well was not really anything to do with the Quest Pro necessarily in terms of hardware, but Mark Zuckerberg did a Verge interview, a video interview, which is on the Verge YouTube channel. And it's just an interesting thing. I just wanted to mention it for people that haven't seen it, because it's interesting to get his take on certain things with regards to how they see the Quest Pro playing into their sort of overall product line in the future. And I think there's a lot of confusion both from consumers, but also probably from Meta themselves into where they want to position this device, because there's no doubt about it that, to me, well, at least in my mind, there's no doubt that it's still a consumer device, maybe not consumer focused. They mention business a lot in the Meta Connect, but I still think that the way he was talking about it in that Verge interview, to me, it's clear that he still sees this as, you know, not necessarily purely business. It's for consumers as well that want the best possible standalone VR headset at this moment in time.
It's that price. It's a hard sell though, isn't it? It's like if that had come out at maybe sort of like, you know, £800, I'd have folded. I can't speak. I'd have had my pre-order in straight away, but at 1,500, it's just it's way too much.
Yeah, I think you're right with that. I think in terms of price, it's definitely. That price is an excuse to say it's business. I will say, like, do you think, because we know it's a more advanced headset than the Quest 2, but based on what we see, the difference in price between the Quest 2 and that headset, to me, just seems like too big a gap. It's like, to me, it feels like they've subsidised the Quest 2. You know, in the past, they've subsidised it even more, but they're still subsidising it, or probably breaking even. I doubt that, but you know, if you're giving it the best case scenario, this one, it feels like they definitely want to make a profit on every single unit sold, because from the difference in specs, it doesn't seem to justify that price from anybody.
Well, in that Verge interview, Zuckerberg keeps getting badgered about, you know, do you make money on this? Do you make losses on it? And he sort of folds at one point, sort of very sort of short answer. But from what he says, it seems that from a manufacturing and component point of view, they're not making a loss on the Pro. They're making something on it. But if you factor in sort of research, development, and all that other sort of thing, then it's a different thing altogether.
Yeah, that's true. I think, to be fair, I mean, yes, of course, they as a business, they'd have to sort of factor all of that stuff in terms of the product, but all of that research and development is going into pretty much every future product they make as well. So eventually that will become less important, but so anyway, just on that point, I think the Verge interview is worth checking out. So did you want to get onto Tilt 5 mats now?
Just quickly, not a lot to say, but the rollable seamless Tilt 5 mats from Dragon Magic Studio hopefully should be available within a few weeks if everything goes according to plan. These are just one-piece rollable mats, no gaps and things that you have to unfold, so it makes a mess of the actual display. Various sizes, starting at $20 for the cheapest mat, going up to $60 for the high-end XE mat. But yeah, hopefully we'll get more info soon. I'm saying hopefully like I'm desperate to get hold of one of these. It's like, maybe I might pay the $20 and plus shipping to try out the cheap one, but my Tilt 5's just been stuck in its box. I know a couple of weeks ago I'd said to you, there's a few things I might have a look at, unpack it and have a look at a couple of things, and you actually said at the time, is it worth the effort? The answer is no. Right, okay. It wasn't.
Oh dear.
So, okay. But yeah, if you're into your Tilt 5, check out Dragon Magic Studio. I think it's dragonmagicstudio.com, and there's a link to their Discord. You'll get information on there once these things are available for sale. Yeah,
it'd be interesting just to see that side by side, just to see the difference with the two mats. How much it affects the experience. But yeah, I was going to ask you if you thought you were going to get one, but we'll wait and see. Maybe. Okay. Well, this past week we learned this is only a test. The Tested podcast. They've had their last episode of that podcast, one that pretty much any VR fan is probably listened to. They had the VR Minute on that for going back very early, and they had a lot of, access to the early Vives, the Rifts, and things like this. So, why don't you tell us about this little section we're going to have in the podcast?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is only a test podcast. It goes back. Was it 10, 12 years or something ridiculous? It's crazy.
Yeah, I think they said 12 years. I think it's 2010 that it started, yeah.
And they've always been a proponent of VR. They've loved it from the beginning. And yeah, last week's was the last episode. There was Norman who always hosts it. They had Jeremy Williams back, who's been left for a year or more now. He's now into game development.
Yeah.
And Kishore Hari that who does all the science stuff. And I'll definitely miss that podcast because that was my one-stop shop for sort of like geek news that I might not have been interested in, but it always amused me, especially Jeremy's take on stuff when it came to Star Trek and Marvel. And it was always slightly out of the loop compared to the other two. It's a great podcast.
I sort of, I feel similar to Jeremy in some ways on that, with that kind of Marvel stuff. But I think Norm said on that final episode that Jeremy Williams, it wasn't the same once Jeremy left, and I sort of felt the same as that, to be honest. Yeah,
they seem to know that it hadn't been the same since he left. But the thing with Jeremy, they started a section up once, just based on something he said once, which was things that annoy me.
Yep.
And he used to have a good rant about various things. And so in that spirit, here's something that really it's been annoying me for absolutely ages. And I've mentioned it to people. I thought I'd mentioned it to you, maybe not. But I've mentioned it to a few other people, and they've checked it out, and they've all gone, oh yeah, I didn't notice that. And it's one of these small things. And the thing that annoys me is the lack of attention to detail, otherwise known as the Quest interface not recentering itself properly. And I don't know if anybody's known this. I've had people test it, and the verified it. It's the same for them. If you put your Quest on, sit there, hold the recenter button down, and stay perfectly still, so the interface recenters itself. If you look at it, it's not quite centered, right? And if you close your right eye and look at it with your left eye only, you'll see that the interface is centered perfectly on your left eye. If you then close your left eye, just look through your right eye, you'll see the interface is actually shifted over to the left. So they're centering the interface incorrectly. They're not centering it between your eyes. They're centering it over on the left-hand side. And it's probably a result of just sort of working on it on a monitor, and it looks centered on that single view on the monitor, maybe.
Yeah.
It's been driving me crazy for the past 2 years. Will you please fix it?
There we go. I'm gonna have to. I mentioned before we did the show. I didn't know what you were talking about when you put this in the notes. I didn't, because I love the idea for this section, because I love that section on this is only a test, and this is sort of very similar in some respects. This particular issue that you have with this, very similar in some respects to some of the ones that Jeremy had, in terms that it's so minor and yet I can understand it irritating.
Every time it's like every time I look at it, it's there.
I'll be honest, I don't notice it. That's the problem. Maybe I'm going to have another look. I need to have another look at this. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to recenter, and then the interface in front of me is going to be in the center on my left eye. If I close my right eye, I'll see it in the center on my left eye, but with the right eye, it will look like it's off center.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, yes, Oculus, Meta, whatever you call yourself now, fix it for Yorkshire. Get it sorted.
There we go. We finally got somebody to call out the uncall-outable, and they'll fix it, I suppose. Yeah. Well, everybody that's listening to this or watching it, leave a comment. Let us know. Send an email to recenteredpodcast@gmail.com if this annoys you to the same extent as it does Rog. But well, what we'll do, we'll finish the episode there. There's just a couple of things we wanted to mention. The first thing is there's this thing, you mentioned it a few weeks ago, didn't you, Rog? These Quest game link referrals.
Yeah.
Where you can go into, on the app on your phone, you can go into there, look at your library of games, click on a game, and then click on the 3 dots in the bottom right, and you might get a referral link for certain games within your library. And if you share this link, then the person who uses this link to purchase that game will get 25% off, and you'll get some cash as well as a reward for referring the game to them. I think it's £4 that you get a little bonus, or is it up to £4? I don't know if you get £4 for every single one.
It seems to be £4 or $5 for each one, and it's only it's only for titles that are over a certain value. It's something, maybe, is it the $12 to $13 range maybe, or is it? I might have had one for a referral for one for $10.99, but once you're under a tenner, I don't think you get a referral for that.
Okay. That's what it is. Okay, right, got you. Yeah, so, but what we thought, it's a great way to just put some links in the description of this video on YouTube, and I'll put the links on the podcast description, the audio podcast description as well, with a list of just some games on there, and anybody who wants to pick up a game and also simultaneously help support the show, then you'll get 25% off the game, and you'll give us a little bonus as well to add on to our Oculus account or Meta account, and so we can pick up some more games to talk about on the show. It's just sort of like a win-win way of supporting the show, I suppose, if there's any particular game that you're looking for. And also, quickly, if you wanted to join the Immerse Robot Discord, then you can go on there and request game referral links. If there's a game that you want and you want to get a 25% discount, then why not come on the Discord, request that game, and we can see if we can help you out. If we own it and we get a link referral, then we can obviously just post that in Discord. But yeah, anything you want to add to that, Rog?
No, not really. It's just, if anybody does buy a game via a referral, would be greatly appreciated. I've definitely been spending a little bit more on games than I normally would have done, and I'm just by sheer reason of being, of doing the podcast. Yeah. So if anybody can help offset that, and the actual, there is a small cost as well for propagating the show out using the service we do. Any help via that method would be greatly appreciated, and it won't cost you anything. It'll just save you money. Exactly, yeah. It just seems like a perfect way of supporting the show. Like I say, if there's a game you're looking for, why not use that link and get 25% off? But yeah, just wanted to mention that. And if you do want to get in contact with us, then you can, as I mentioned, contact us via recenteredpodcast@gmail.com. Leave a comment on the YouTube video, or follow us on Twitter as well. You can do that as well. But all the links and everything will be in the description.
But that's pretty much it. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll start to get some more news. Maybe we'll get some more news on PSVR 2, some more announcements and stuff like that. That'd be good to keep us going on the news front. And
definitely.
In the meantime, I'm going to desperately try to get a demo of Quest Pro as well, so I can talk about that. But incidentally, actually, we've mentioned Coffee and VR. Go onto the Rendered Reality YouTube channel as well, just to check out their video. So Sean and Tyler went to demo the Quest Pro. Sean's also got one on order, which he'll be receiving soon. But they've got some, it's just a good video with some good information on there from testing it in a Best Buy in the US. So yeah, check that out.
Yeah, that's their most viewed video ever. I think they're up to 23,000 views at the minute.
Oh, really?
Which is massive for those guys. So yeah, go and check it out.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it from us. Thank you very much for watching and listening to this show, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, everyone.